I do a lot of work with self-compassion, help them feel compassion for their bodies because what happens when we get sick? First of all, we think, I fed this body green juice, exercise, did everything right, and it failed me and I got cancer. So we immediately turn against our own bodies. So helping them feel compassion so they can love their body because if we don't love our bodies, it's hard to pleasure the body that we don't love.
Hey, curious people, you're listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast, where we explore our fascinating internal sexual landscapes and discover our authentic sexual selves. I'm your host, Patricia Rich, a certified internal family systems and sex therapist, coach, and creator of the Self-Led Sexuality model for healing, pleasure, and empowerment. I've spent the last 30 years helping people to develop fulfilling relationships with themselves and others. If you're ready for some warm, smart, and juicy conversations, me and my parts invite you and your parts to get cozy and settle in. Today's guest, Dr. Sabitha Pillai-Friedman, was already an AASECT certified sex therapist when she underwent her own breast cancer journey. Fortunately, she recovered from the illness and also saw firsthand how hard it was to feel sexy again, and also how little information was provided about sexuality by the medical system. In response, she began educating cancer survivors, their partners, and organizations about sexual recovery after cancer treatment, and has a special passion for the creative use of fantasy to stimulate sexual feelings once more. I bring in the parts perspective as we explore how sexual losses, once grieved, can become opportunities for sexual growth and expansion. In addition to her private practice in Philadelphia, Sabitha presents internationally on wide-ranging topics related to relationships and sexuality. She is an adjunct associate professor at the Center for Human Sexuality Studies at Widener University and is the co-host of the podcast Our Better Half, which focuses on the beauty of human sexuality in the later half of life. Hi, Sabitha, and welcome to Self-Led in Bed.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Delightful to be with you.
So I'm really interested in the topic that we're going to be discussing today. But before we jump into it, I just wanted to ask you, what are you noticing as we step into this conversation?
A lot of excitement, maybe a little bit of anxiety, but always comes with any sort of performative thing, you're performing in front of a group of people. But this is really a very exciting topic, so I'm excited about it.
Great. And where are you located in the world?
I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And we are not so far away from each other. I
I
am
know.
just outside of Philadelphia, and I can share with listeners that I first met you as one of my very first instructors in sex therapy.
Yes,
So
yes,
we
you are a
have,
delightful student.
well, thank you. You were a delightful instructor, and I'm so glad we've maintained our connection over the years, and I continue to
Yes.
learn from you. And I'll just take a moment to invite you to share any aspects of your identity that you would want to share with listeners.
Before I say that, I also want you to know that I've learned a lot from you and I'm learning a lot from you. So that has been a very interesting full circle moment for me. So, what would I like to share about myself? I am an older woman. I was born in the Middle East, raised in India, came to the United States when I was 27 years old. So I've lived in the United States longer than I've lived in India. And I started my career as a couple, and I actually started my career as a family therapist. I worked in Kensington with families and children. I did a lot of work with children, so child therapist and family therapist. And then after I had my own children, I was in a play group with my children's peers And I noticed that everybody was talking about relationship issues and sexuality. So I decided that it was time to get some training and expand my focus to adult work with adults, and which included couple therapy and sex therapy. So that's how I got trained.
Great. You've had a career where you've done a lot of different things, but I'm
Yes.
wondering what you're particularly passionate about today.
My passion has evolved over the years. So when I was younger and I had young children, it was mostly to do with dual career parents and coping and adjustment. And then, I started, getting involved with parenting issues and relationships. And then I was diagnosed with cancer in 2009, and I was treated for cancer. And at this time, I was already trained as a sex therapist. And I noticed that one of the areas that was not getting any attention for cancer survivors on treatment of cancer survivors is the area of sexuality post cancer treatment. Nobody was talking about it. Healthcare providers were not talking about it. Therapists were not talking about it. I was invited by Living Beyond Breast Cancer to give a talk at their conference about sexuality after cancer treatment. And I just saw the energy in the room shift. Everybody was so hungry for this information. And I thought, oh, this is what I need to do because this is a very underserved population. So after that talk, I got invited by Young Survivors Coalition, by Force, by different breast cancer organizations, and they all invited me to speak about cancer and sexuality. My current home for my work is Unite for Her.
So, Sabita, when you were talking to these audiences and through your own lived experience, I'm just curious, what were you or what were these people experiencing that was not being addressed?
Most of the times, what I heard was there was very little attention to the feeling of loss they were feeling. They have, one woman told me, I've lost my breast, I've lost my ovaries, I've lost my uterus. Am I still a woman? It was one of the most powerful comments I heard from one of the attendees at the Young Survivors Coalition conference. And now I do a lot of volunteer work with Unite for Her, and I hear these comments all the time from the attendees. I've lost so much. My body doesn't feel like it was before. I feel no desire. I feel no sensation, and I'm not able to experience any pleasure. Will this ever get better? So, the most common concern is that these people are not getting any information about the sexual side effects of cancer treatment, of all the medications on all the side effects, the surgery, the hormone treatment, radiation, all of these have sexual side effects. But these are not being discussed. Because these are not being discussed, they don't know what to anticipate when they're receiving treatment. So they're shocked when their body changes, and it really seriously impacts their sexual ability. So that really upsets them.
Yeah. So I want to just pause a minute here and just invite listeners, to notice what's coming up for them. Number one, sexual losses and cancer, breast cancer are topics that, might bring up parts, right? Parts that want to turn it off, that don't want to think about it, or that maybe have had some experiences. So I just want to invite everyone to just see, how's this landing for you? Who's coming to mind? Is your body listening to this too? Just noticing what's here with that. And I notice I'm maybe still taking in a little bit in terms of this journey. So there's someone who becomes diagnosed with cancer. So that's a whole phase, right? That's
Yes.
a huge can be a big crisis depending, what's going on, right? And then you're talking about during that people are noticing these things as they're going through treatment or post treatment.
It could, they notice it during treatment as well. Like, after, for instance, after surgery, they notice that parts of their body has become numb. And they've also lost parts of their body that used to be sensual and sexual. And now it's been replaced by parts that don't feel the sensations that it felt before.
Mhm.
And
Like breast
similarly,
reconstruction, breast
bread,
reconstruction.
yes, yes. It may look very beautiful. The reconstructed breast may look beautiful, but it may not have the sensation it had before. So they certainly miss that. And, when with hormone treatment, estrogen is pretty much taken out of your body. When hormone is, kind of when you go through hormone deprivation treatment, it affects your sexual function because you suffer from vaginal dryness and you can have arousal issues, desire issues. So these are all things that they do not anticipate because they do not hear about it before the treatment starts. So
Okay.
sometimes, people tell me I feel blindsided by what happened.
So then in addition to I'm just picturing, all of the different elements here that people's systems are needing to process. So there's the cancer and all the
Yes.
emotions of cancer reacting to that, the existential, questions and so forth
Yes. Yes.
and dangers and then there's the physical recovery and shifts. And then
Yes.
there's the sexual implications of all of that. And
Mhm.
then it sounds like a sense of being blindsided, then is kind of like a relational rupture almost with the medical team if no one
Yes.
has prepared people that this is a likely outcome.
That's an excellent compilation of what I said. Thank you. And another thing that happens, another dynamic that happens between family, friends, and healthcare providers is the pressure to not talk about your sexual losses. So most of the people I work with say, my friends and family, they say, you're lucky to be alive. Don't talk about that your body is not feeling sexual or you're feeling bad about losing your breast. Your breasts look great now. You have new breasts and it looks great. So there's also almost a kind of a need on the part of society to disenfranchise the loss. That is to not to talk about it and to ignore it. And so there's a lot of pressure on people to just not talk about these losses. So that is something that a lot of people talk to me about.
So that is really interesting to me. And I'm just hearing, and I like to think about multi-systemic layers here
Yes.
because we have then sort of the minimization of the
Yes.
importance of sexuality
Yes.
as an aspect of our identity and expression and form of connection with others, right? So there's sort of this cultural burden where we might really miss and minimize how core our
Yes.
sexuality can be, right? And then this also, people generally, at least in Western cultures, don't do that great with grief and loss.
No.
And so, better to smooth it over and point
Mhm.
at what is here. And of course, I'm sure people are very relieved, that their friend or loved one has survived this treatment. That loss, it feels like there's two kind of exiled topics or
Yes.
experiences colliding in what you're saying.
Yes. The topic of sexual losses is definitely exiled, as you would say it. And this is also common among older adults. We experience sexual losses throughout our lifespan. So after we give birth, our body changes completely. I remember young people telling me after the birth of your child, oh, my breast doesn't feel the same. My body doesn't, everything feels loose. Everything feels like it's falling out. So the loss starts then, and then it continues on. And then as we get older, our body changes again. So throughout our lifespan, we're experiencing loss. But when an older person says, "Oh, I hate these wrinkles. I hate this gray hair," most people who are listening to this would say something like, "Well, it beats the alternative." Again, that way they kind of stifle the any kind of mention of sexual losses or body losses because these losses experience, why not talk about it and address it instead of saying, okay, I'm grateful to be alive, I shouldn't be talking about it.
And so I'm going to use a little more IFS language, and I'll just
Yes.
share that you have different orientation and background, and have also been learning a bit of IFS as well.
Yes.
Um, and I'm bringing in the IFS lens here that we might have different parts of ourselves that are representing different pieces of this, parts that want, that are feeling maybe really depressed or grieving or despairing of feeling something we used to feel. And then other parts that are looking at the big picture and, oh my goodness, we're alive and it could be so much worse. And, there's just can be a chorus of parts that are all holding true things. There's truth in
Yes.
all of it, right?
Yes.
But just another thing we're not really necessarily used to doing is tolerating ambiguity and a lot of different things kind of being true at the same time, right? So
Yes.
even for those folks listening who are going through this, or maybe who are therapists and help others, and I want to hear a lot more about how you approach these things, but even at this point, I think just the gift of making space for all the different thoughts and feelings, and the ones that are angry and the ones that are grateful and the ones that are scared and the ones that are hopeful, just to make room for all of it
Yes.
could be a real
Yes.
gift, I would imagine.
It is a great gift. And in my article, I talk about the author Robert Niemeyer, who talks about, being able to tolerate ambiguity is very important when you're dealing with losses. So that's pretty much what you're talking about in IFS language, holding all the parts and being able to balance them.
I'm reminded of my social work education way back at University of Chicago, and we had this really wonderful instructor who was coming toward retirement, and she had so many pearls of wisdom, and she was a self-psychology expert.
Hmm.
And she talked about how she had embroidered on a pillow, or one of her students maybe embroidered it on a pillow for her because she said it all the time. And she
Hmm.
said the hallmark of adult maturity is the ability to tolerate ambiguity.
Love it. I need it in my pillow, on my
Yes, I
pillow.
need it too. I remind myself if that was not IFS, but very IFS, right?
It
So,
is very IFS too. Yes.
but just true, right? That the older
Very
we
true.
get, the more ambiguous these things are.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
So, how do you help people in
Mhm.
addition to perhaps it sounds like you do educating and
Yes.
so
Yes.
forth? I don't know if you want to say more about that and then a little more about how
Mhm.
you help people work with these feelings.
The first few stages are basically embodied in the whole Plicit model that we all studied in our, sex therapy class, which
So,
is
PLISSIT is an acronym
ac
PLISSIT.
yes, it's an acronym for initiative, so each pair of letters means something. So it's permission giving. P stands by itself. Permission giving, limited information, specific suggestions, and intensive therapy. Most of the times when we get sick, we almost feel like we don't deserve sex because our body is worn out. We are not in good shape. We don't feel like we deserve pleasure. So, one of the first things that I do as a sex therapist is give people permission to experience pleasure, to explore their bodies, even though they are turned off by it. So that is the piece that is very important, giving permission. And limited information is all the information they're not getting from their healthcare professionals. I give them handouts. I give them material on sexual side effects of medications, of surgery, of radiation. And then I also give them specific suggestions, which is if you're experiencing pain during penetration, use lubricants, certain kinds of lubricants that work for cancer survivors, and moisturizers to moisturize your vaginal area. And, when you are experiencing radiation burns, there are certain salves that can be used. So I provide specific suggestions, and graded dilators can be used to dilate the genitalia. So, they are able to take control of making their bodies more sexually supple and ready. So I give all this information. And intensive therapy pretty much deals with, the sadness of the loss and trauma that happens. There's always, people always talk about medical trauma when they got the diagnosis, when they went through the treatments. So dealing with the traumas. So I do a lot of work with self-compassion, help them feel compassion for their bodies, because what happens when we get sick? First of all, we think, I fed this body green juice, exercised, did everything right, and it failed me, and I got cancer. So we immediately turn against our own bodies. So helping them feel compassion so they can love their body, because if we don't love our bodies, it's hard to pleasure the body that we don't love.
Yeah. Wow. So lots of different pieces there, right? So the Plicit piece, which is great, and folks can learn more about the Plicit model. There's a lot of resources about that, and you're tailoring it. And I'm just curious because I know you're talking about your journey and your work with breast cancer survivors. Do you work with men? Uh,
I do.
do you work with people who have other kinds of cancers?
I work with all survivors of all cancers. I also have worked with people who have been diagnosed with MS, all kinds of health issues. I see a lot of people who are getting older and worried about their bodies because they're getting older. I do presentations for prostate cancer survivors. So the organization I'm currently actively volunteering for is called Unite for Her. And this organization works with breast cancer survivors and ovarian cancer survivors.
So the principles carry through for everybody. It
Yes,
sounds
it's
like.
really it's very similar themes you see that comes up. I work with anybody who is experiencing loss, and especially sexual loss, because that is very specific to my training.
Okay, that's great and so needed. And I'm wondering then, so there's grief work and the information, and I hear getting kind of learning how to work with the body as it is. And I'm wondering about fantasy and
Mhm.
eroticism. And once you get past kind of the baseline of your body being,
Yes.
being able to maybe be, this is an interesting thing. I don't even know if that's a baseline, because sometimes people may not be pain free or they may not
Mhm.
regain functioning as they had it before.
Yes.
So, whether or
Yes.
not that happens, how do you help people to feel sexy?
That's a wonderful question, because that is one of my second most interesting topics, which is like I really love to talk about sexual fantasies. I teach a class on sexual fantasies for Widener University, and I would love to eventually write a book. Now that I've mentioned it, I have to, on sexual fantasies, because when our whole body feels like it is checked out, we don't have agency over the eroticism of our body. I always remind people your brain is your biggest sex organ, and it's still there. So your memories of sexuality, what you did, sensual experiences, it's all stored in your brain. So it is very, very possible for you to rekindle your mind with these sexual thoughts. So So again, this requires if you don't do the grief work, it's kind of hard to go there because sometimes people tell me, you told me to, self pleasure, but when I touch my body and I feel like it's not the same, then I feel the grief overwhelm me. So, doing the grief work is really important. And then helping them feel self compassion. One of the techniques I use is have them write a letter to their old breast or their old prostate or their body with prostate. And, say, I loved all of the things. I loved that you gave me my first pleasure. I love that you helped me nurse my baby. I love that you helped me produce eggs for to have my children. I love all of this. But now I have to let you go because I think it didn't, or you became sick and I need to let you go. And now embrace the new body, embrace the new breast, the new body without the prostate, or the new body with altered ovaries, with the after a hysterectomy, and welcome the body and say, you've been there for me. I'm going to love you. I'm going to take care of you. You deserve pleasure too. And I'm going to find a way to give you pleasure.
Wow.
So,
That's really potent and beautiful. Yeah.
yes, helping them develop that script is very helpful because then they can keep that in mind when they are embarking on this fantasy journey. What are some fantasies I can bring up and that would work for me? And so, so a lot of people start, re-engaging with their body once they start re-engaging their mind sexually.
Very interesting. I do work with people around some of these similar things,
Yes.
less work, not as specialized as you are. And the one thing I do sometimes is a body scan and help
Yes.
people to do a body scan. And I realize that, like, I'm doing these in groups, and I've learned to add on the instructions the body parts I name, just you may or may not have that body part,
Yes.
and just noticing what's there for you. And
Yes.
as it's named, and maybe there's some feelings there. And sometimes there's what I call like a liminal presence of that,
Yes.
that
Yes.
with in the felt sense, just like people have, I don't know if they still use the term phantom limb
Yes.
and things
Yes.
like that, that people can still actually feel, say, their uterus, even if they had a
Yes.
hysterectomy, and kind of the energetic presence of what was there, while
Yes.
also being with the parts of themselves that, are aware that it isn't physically there or have grief or loss around it.
They have helped people with spinal cord injuries experience orgasms. So a body can do such miracles. So we can actually find a way to reach those parts. You're right about that.
It's really creating a more positive healing relationship between the person and their
Yes.
body if they experience them
Yes.
separate
Yes.
as separate. And
Yes.
I was reading through your article, which we'll note in the show notes, and
Yes.
you made an interesting point about how with illness or surgery someone can move from being embodied,
Yes.
feeling very connected and like they're really in their body, inhabiting their body,
Yes.
to being disembodied.
Yes.
And then after a healing process, and again, you're talking about people who have gone into remission, I believe,
Yes.
becoming embodied again.
Yes. But there could be people who are metastatic, so who are cycling between the embodied to the disembodied. Metastatic cancer is no longer considered a death sentence. It's now considered a chronic illness. So they could go through many, many years of survivorship with metastatic cancer while going through treatment. So they could feel good when they're between treatments. When they're getting the treatment, their bodies change. So they could experience the disembodiment. So they could cycle back and forth between embodiment and disembodiment.
So I'm gonna IFS out here again for a minute
Sure.
because we have this notion that our protector parts can be the ones that take us out. You know, that dissociating or becoming disembodied could be a protective
Hmm.
instinct in order to not feel pain,
Yes.
to distance, you know, to for different reasons, right? And so this
Yes.
idea of disembodiment, would that align with what you see that people maybe disconnect in some way from their body to not
Yes.
experience pain, to not feel sick, like for different reasons?
Or they could look at their bodies as burden, as something that's broken, that's burden, and they're disappointed with their bodies. The disembodiment can present itself in many different ways. They could check out. They could also express active disgust, hate, or disappointment with their body that is not healing, that's not getting better, that's not feeling sensation.
So then that sort of division grows between the
Yes.
body and the kind of main
Yeah.
thought,
Yes.
thinking aspect of oneself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So do you see people experience sexual joy
All
after
the
going through these experiences? Can you tell a
all
story?
the time. All the time. For self-compassion, I do a script. I kind of write a script for each client who comes in. I do a sexual compassion script for them based on what they're upset about with their bodies. And I read it to them and I have them take it home and read it to themselves. So I have them do that. Absolutely. And I have had clients who have had cancer write fantasies, like fantasy scripts for themselves and live it because it has really helped them to kind of go into that realm of feeding their brain with active thoughts and fantasies about sexuality, bringing in past memories sometimes, creating new memories. Sometimes I have them read erotica, listen to erotica, so they can actually also create new stories and memories. So I really find Dipsea is an app, Dipsea is an app. I sometimes have them listen to Dipsea. I have them read erotica. I have a list of erotic books, depending on their taste. You really have to kind of, it's a custom fit really because our fantasies are so unique. So I usually spend a lot of time finding out what they like. If they like literature, then, you know, Lady Chatterley's Lover or one of these wonderful literary books that have a lot of erotic elements in them. So it really is an art finding what turns them on. Because I remember working with someone who had experienced sexual pain her entire life and had never had a positive sexual experience. So I had to really take her back to the first moment when she felt excitement in her body. And that was when she was newly dating and she came out of the a room to meet her partner and he looked at her with fondness. And that was the first time she experienced excitement and her body felt the excitement. I had to keep taking her back to that moment to capture that. Can you make it bigger?
Yeah, I love, and I'm hearing actually how collaboratively you're working with them. And so I imagine they're kind of borrowing in some ways your enthusiasm and your positive outlook and the valuing and we mentioned permission. It sounds like more than permission. It's permission plus enthusiasm for finding what is going to work now.
Yeah, I love that.
And
I like the permission plus,
so we
giving
have,
permission and gently leading them there.
yeah, yeah. And with that process, gently leading them there, I'm imagining, well, I have two different things that I see and curious how this sounds for you. One is that people who started out with a pretty positive feeling toward their sexuality would have an easier time on this reclamation journey.
You're so
And
right.
people who started out with a lot of shame or restriction or trauma, this is going to be a heavier lift.
You're right about that. People who have a positive sexual cell schema before they were diagnosed with cancer are more likely to bounce back because they've had positive memories. So sexual self-schema is what we think of ourselves as sexual beings. So if you have positive sexual self-schema, then even though a sexual self-schema gets altered when we are diagnosed with cancer and our bodies change, we can still reclaim that part of ourselves. It's harder for people who have been traumatized and whose sexual self-schema was not that great to begin with. Then you have a lot more work to do.
And I would also guess that in a weird way, this could be an opportunity for someone to
Yes.
have a sexual update, a sexual even awakening, perhaps through
Yes.
something that was, a negative or a scary health crisis. But for those who can commit to
Yes.
this kind of journey, it maybe is a way to even broaden
Yes.
sexual.
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about all the time in my talks with cancer survivors, thrivers, patients is the importance of broadening your interpretation of sex. So this pretty much opens up, it's like a canvas. You can do whatever you want sexually. You can just recreate sexuality for yourself, not only for yourself, but also for your relationship. People in partnered relationship can really do a hard reset. We used to do like a 5 minute get in and out, quick, PV, penile vaginal intercourse experience. It's not going to work anymore. Can we try something different? So then I have a chance to educate them about the slow burn, about the longer exploration, about the extended foreplay, about the creative ways to be sexual, about introducing some kink such as blindfolding and using playful techniques. So there are many, many ways to make sex playful, interesting, and fun. And so this definitely can bring about what you refer to, maybe like even as a reset. So they can go from boring 5 minute quickie sex to this really extended erotic experiences.
And you mentioned partners, and
Yes,
to go back to the grief piece for a minute and
yes,
disenfranchised losses. I just
yes,
want to take a second there, right? Because it feels like it would be often there wouldn't be anywhere for a partner
yes,
to be able to really voice their own grief and
yes,
fear about, again, you have the cancer and prospect of losing
yes,
the person
yes,
as a whole. So then how could you be having feelings of loss or grief because, and maybe parts could judge having a reaction to,
yes,
gosh, it's my partner's body is scarred now, or
yes,
it doesn't
yes,
turn me on the same way, or it just feels like there's a
yes,
lot of things that would be taboo to be able to
yes.
voice for partners.
So yes, it's a hard thing to talk about when you are supposed to be the supportive caregiver. You're not supposed to talk about your disappointment, your sadness. So the loss goes both ways. The loss is experienced by the partner who's experiencing the cancer and also by the partner who is in a relationship with the person who's experiencing the cancer because their relationship also has changed. So it is really important. I find it important to bring in the partner and to give them time to express their disappointment, their sadness. Sometimes people have come in and said, my partner decided not to get tattoos on her nipples, and she doesn't have nipples, and it makes me very sad because I don't feel turned on by it. So these are things they would never think of talking to their partner about because they don't want to offend them. But they can talk to someone who is willing to listen to them and hold on to that feeling and then who can help them.
So
I've,
maybe you would meet individually with partners and
yes,
then
yes,
also work with them together.
yes, that is really at least one session to hear them talk about their feelings is really important because it really protects the relationship because then they get to air out their feelings and then they get to talk to each other about what's going to work. So sometimes I help people create scripts. They can say something like, I'm not able to have penetrative sex, but I would love to cuddle with you and I would love to engage in some caressing and some other creative ways to be sexual. How do you feel about it? So having these conversations, which can also be validating for their partner, because, most of the times, Patty, as a sex therapist, when one person is feeling uncomfortable about sex, they would stop touching their partner because they're worried touch would mean something to their partner and they would then reach out for more and they're not willing to go further than that. Then, kind of normalizing touch and then helping them create a script for talking to each other.
There's such wisdom in what you're sharing because sometimes just finding the words, finding the language,
Yes.
practicing saying it
Yes.
is yet another challenge that people can face.
Yes.
And I find this is another IFS thing. Like we often want to guess at what parts are around and why they're
Yes.
doing what they're doing. But the approach teaches us not to do that and to bring our curiosity and to like
Yes.
ask a part of ourselves what is this like for you? What are you concerned about? What are you afraid would happen if you did something different? That kind of
Yes.
curiosity.
Yes.
And so I find the same thing with couples,
Yes.
as both being in a couple, I might
Yes.
think I know what my partner is thinking and feeling. In fact,
Yes.
parts of me are sure that they do. And I'm often wrong, as it turns out. And as a therapist, sometimes I might think I know what a couple is feeling or needing or wanting, but I can't assume anything. I was thinking about that because one thing that occurred to me is I might be thinking, oh, this couple needs help with their, overcoming maybe a physical challenge that they're having. But really
Yep.
what might be going on is, oh, you know what? We've gotten into a caregiver patient relationship, which has
Yes.
de-eroticized our connection.
Yes.
And in
Yes.
order to feel sexy, maybe, we really need to mix that dynamic up. I need to not ask you if you took your pills, and I need to,
Yes. Yes.
trust that you can get yourself ready, to be together without hovering. And
Yes, you're right. You're so right about that.
I spent years working in a caregiver support program. This was
Yes.
actually while I was starting the program that you were my instructor, one of my instructors in
Yes.
sex therapy. I was also working in a caregiver support program,
Hmm.
mostly with elders. And I always remember this one client where, we got a face sheet that kind of tells you the little quick description of what the
Yes.
client might want help with. And then I was doing home visits. So we would go out to the house.
Yes.
And so what I saw was there was this woman, she's 80 years old and she's depressed and she had cancer recently and she's widowed. And so she wants a visit. So I
Yeah.
had in my mind a certain idea of what kind of topic we would be addressing. And
Hmm.
when I got to her house, I'm like, well, what's going on? And she's like, um, it turned out that after she was widowed, she had started dating this guy.
Oh.
And she said, I'm feeling really anxious because I think that my boyfriend just wants me for my body.
Hmm.
And she had this sexual awakening at 80
Hmm.
after having had cancer and gone through these different things and was suddenly feeling like, oh, we're so sexually engaged that I don't know if he really wants me for me.
Oh, okay.
And so it was a big learning for me about not assuming I know
Yes.
what the issues are. And then, of course, there were other things, to flesh out with her about that. But she was really kind of empowered at this time in her
I think
life.
it's wonderful she was able to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, one of the things I like about the self-led sexuality approach
Yes.
is this idea that our sexuality doesn't dwell in any particular part of our body or exclusively, that our sexuality isn't based on having this or that or looking a certain way, but it's more of
Yes.
this energy of really feeling vibrantly, who we are and being able to express our longings and have fun and pleasure. So, this idea that our sexual self energy is
Yes.
something that we can access when we've attended to all these other, you know, maybe not all of them, but the ones that might be
Yes. Yes. I,
blocking
I love
us.
that. I love that. I love the way you're saying that. Yes. I agree with you.
And that can be a really useful frame for people
Yes.
who are forced out of their old script.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
people might choose to expand their sense of their sexuality, but sometimes you
Yes.
really with cancer, with illness, with aging,
Yes.
sometimes
Yes.
it's not a choice. We get kind of
Yes.
pushed into a different kind of, situation.
I tell my all my clients, do not think sex as one dish. Think of it as a buffet. If you could, go into a room with several dishes that are all put out for you, that's what sex is. You can do so many things with it. Don't limit yourself to one dish.
I love that. Yeah. So, is there anything you'd want to say that has surprised you in this work?
When I started this work, I was still going through my treatment, you see. So I was basically fumbling through because I was going through all of this myself. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm able to do the work I'm supposed to do. But what has surprised me is how resilient people are. People are so resilient. They just need the right help. Once they get the right help, they thrive. They do so well. So, the cancer survivors I work with, this organization I volunteer for, I'm constantly rewarded by sexual resilience that amazes me and is very rewarding and invalidating, very validating to me.
I love that. And the work you're doing is so important. And I feel it simultaneous like grief and celebration of how come this information isn't more available? How
I
many
know.
people suffer who still don't have access to that
Yes.
information and that kind of support and encouragement? And then the
Yes.
celebration of what's possible
Yes.
and your amazing work in helping other people to learn about this too.
Thank you. I really hope some of the listeners would also go to the Unite for Her website because there's a section on sexuality and there are videos of me talking about sex. There's a resource list there. So cancer survivors can actually go get that information, listen to my talks. So it's all there on the
And
website and it's all free.
that's great. And we'll put that in the show notes as
Yes,
well.
please. Yes.
And even if someone listening is not going through this themselves, I think this kind of knowledge is so important so we could be an ally to others in our lives or
Yes.
perhaps our clients or
Yes.
partners. So before we end, I want to ask you, what is something that you find pleasurable in life that you haven't mentioned yet today?
Oh, I have a long list of things I find pleasure in. I really love cooking.
Cocaine?
Cooking, I know.
Cooking. I thought you said cocaine.
Cooking. You really have a lot of editing to do, Patty. No, I'm talking about cooking. I think
Cooking.
it's my nasal tone because of my cold. Yes, I really enjoy cooking. And with different and I had different herbs and spices and different cuisines. It has really been a big thrill for me. So that is something that I really enjoy. I also enjoy traveling, as you know, and I'm learning Portuguese, which is also exciting for me right now.
I love all those things. I'm thinking about that sexual buffet being mixed with some amazing things to
Yes.
eat along the way.
Yes, I think so. Now you know why I use the sexual buffet analogy because I'm always thinking about food.
I am thrilled that we got to have this conversation. Thank you so much for all
Thank
you've
you.
shared today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Self Led in Bed podcast. Check us out at www.patriciarich.com/podcast, where you can sign up for a free guide to the 6 S's of sexual self-energy. And if you liked this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time.